Okay. So we are going to keep using raw as we do a lot of stuff throughout the semester. The one thing we do this week that kind of gets us a little out of order in the book is we skip ahead to chapter 8. And that's only because it's layers and masking and selection. And I know you know that, but there's a different depth that we can go into with it. And I just find it's weird that it's chapter 8 because we use it every day all the time. So that's why we skip to 8 and then come backwards again, and we do the rest of the book in order. This is the one chapter that throws us off. But in chapter 8, and that's really what I want to focus on, I don't want to necessarily focus today on selections and stuff like that. I know you guys know how to do that. But if there's certain things maybe that we need to brush up on or go over, we can certainly do that. I want to, more than anything, there's one selection thing I want to talk about, which is playing with the pen tool. How many have played with the pen tool? Did you have to do that in fundamentals? I can't remember if they're still making everyone do it in fundamentals. Some people absolutely hate the pen tool, and that's fine. I'm going to make you do it anyway. But the pen tool, I think well, now I'm coming from a design background, so I love the pen tool because when I work with vector art in Illustrator and stuff like that, you have to know the pen tool when you work with vector. But some of you have an interest in commercial photography, and you will have to know the pen tool, especially in that case, which is why I want to make sure that we cover it a bit today. But you may have to select out parts of an image, especially if you do some tabletop photography. There's many cases where you have to select out your image using the pen tool, and then it's used as a clipping path basically to be able to replace the background easier in vector software like Illustrator and even InDesign. So it is important to know it. I don't find as photographers we have to use it as often because usually we're supplying the image and the designer does it, but there are some cases where there is that crossover where the photographer is expected to clip that out and send the finished artwork to a designer. So that is one reason why we talk about that. And there will be some cases where the pen tool just works better for you. So, and if you like it, you might as well use it. But most people curse me when we do the pen tool, so that's your heads up. But I'm talking about the layers and masking and stuff like that. We all know what a layer does, what a layer is, and that kind of stuff. However, there are some advanced features and there are some really good organization features that are important to talk about, which is exactly why we skip ahead to this chapter. As you go on, you might be compositing work together. Maybe it's multiple images that you're merging into one. Maybe it's templates for something. So it's important to have a really solid, we talk about organization of your files all the time, which is important, but it's really important to have solid organizations of your layers too, because what I find, and even just kind of going through that first assignment that you did, there's a handful of people that don't label their layers at all. And I have some examples. I don't know if it's on this hard drive though now. The whole drive is crushed. Do I have a hard drive that I would have that on that I could get to? Ugh. It's the one set of files I'm trying to recover right now, is the wedding album files with the example that I want for you guys. Let's see, there's got to be one somewhere. Well, I can make one. Oh, you know what? I'll just download one of those files. Okay. Now, we also, as photographers, don't have time to design stuff ourselves, which, if you have any design background whatsoever, kills a part of your soul. But, you come to the realization that I have to get this done and I have to get it done fast. So there are times where you may just buy a template for something. Maybe you're doing an album for whatever reason. Maybe you're doing an album for maybe you're designing your portfolio and you're doing a multi-image page that will be printed out as one page in your portfolio. And you might not have the time. Maybe you don't have the skill set to put that stuff together. So you end up downloading some type of template. Now, I will get into my account and download one for you guys to use. If I can remember my login. So there are websites that you can pay a monthly fee. You can do a one-time purchase type of a deal. That one? Nope. That one. Crap. Oh, it helped if my email was right. That'd probably make a difference. Now it's probably the wrong email. There we go. Okay. So if I do, let's get into albums here. This is probably the easiest one. So if you end up downloading, now there's plenty of websites where you can download stuff from. So don't underestimate, and we talk about this when we talk about presets in other classes. We talked about that last week when we talked about presets for Camera Raw. Etsy is very good for album templates.
Free ones sometimes?
Not so much on Etsy, but some other websites will offer free ones.
Mm-hmm.
Does MCP Actions? I think they only have actions and presets. I don't think.
Not if it matters to me. I just was curious.
Yeah, but no, there are some where you can they'll give you like a free sample set and stuff like that that you can download.
What is the best website that you would recommend for what we were just talking about, not presets, but
more so the templates?
Yeah.
That's a good question. What is the name of that one? It's crud. It's a famous author. And it's a website based off of that. Let's type this and see if it comes up. Because my mind is drawing a blank. Photoshop, let's do... Oh, one of my favorite websites is... that's not the one. It's a similar name. That every designer should own. Oh, one of my favorite ones, actually. Design Cuts. There we go. I'm like, why can't I think of it? One of my favorite websites, just design and photography standpoint, is Design Cuts. Every week, and from a template standpoint, this is awesome too, but every week, every Friday, they have Freebie Friday. So you get an email every Friday, and they have a set of free things. It could be free fonts. It could be free templates, layouts, textures, like a ton of free stuff. But even the stuff that you purchase is so steeply discounted that it's awesome. I mean, I download stuff from this website all the time. And actually, my sister's the one that sent it to me because she's a designer, and she said, I bet you could use this. So like, here we go, wedding mock-ups and stuff like that. Like if you're doing, you could mock up, like for a designer, we would mock up a wedding invitation, and then we would just replace this invite with our design, and then it looks like a mock-up. So there's certain things like that, but they have all these free sets of things. And for photographers, when they have fonts, textures, those are good ones to have. These are nice too. We're actually going to create this when we do compositing. When you do compositing, you're going to create these pieces. So you're going to photograph all these elements individually and create them as individual files that can then be pieced together in Photoshop. So we'll be talking about creating this. However, this is one of those things that you can create that we would need the multi-layers, the selections, and all of that stuff. So we're kind of working towards eventually creating that as we talk about this stuff today. But this one looks like this is a free one. So this is a free one here, but this site's just kind of cool. Even their bundles, the prices aren't that bad for the amount of stuff that you get. Like this one, so it's $29, but when you scroll down to see what you get, oops, that's not what I wanted. When you scroll down to see what you get all of this stuff within there. I believe this whole thing. File do now, bundle. Let me see what it says. But it'll tell you it's like a 99% discount. That's not what I want. I just want it to give me, yeah, it is the whole thing. So it's steeply discounted. So it's like a $2,000 package for $29. And you get all of this stuff within that package for $29. And when we're overlaying stuff and blending stuff, which is some of what we're talking about today, it's pretty awesome to have textures to do that stuff. So I love that site. They don't often have as many templates though, but they have pieces that you could use. I got a deal on Squeejo, I don't know how it's supposed to be pronounced. I got a deal on that once. There was something on Facebook where it was like $5 a month for 3 months. And then for some reason, it never changed the price. So I've been paying $5 a month for 3 years. So it was a good deal. They change the templates all the time. And, you know, you can just, but you could download everything in a month and then just cancel it if you really wanted to. I know that sounds horrible to say. And there's other websites like that. I just found this deal, so I tend to use it. The one thing I like about this particular one is they have an unbranded catalog. So when I'm doing, now again, I do portrait, but when I do Christmas cards and stuff like that or graduation cards, I will often lay out my own. But when it comes to crunch time around Christmas, I don't have enough time. They have an unbranded site that you can send a link. So I could send holidays. I can send a link directly to the holiday cards, and it doesn't have their name on it, so it's completely unbranded to them. But my client can then look through all the holiday cards and tell me which one they want, and then I just go in and download it. So I do like that they have that. Some of the labs that you get, professional labs, will offer templates or links to other sites where you can get templates. So there are so many resources. Let's see, integrated services. Nope, that's not what I want. Maybe it's under downloads. That's usually their templates though. They used to have a link right on here. I can't remember. They moved it though. But a lot of the labs will offer links to other sites where they have templates and offer free templates at certain times of the year. Like you get one around Christmas for the free Christmas card template of the year, and then you get one for graduation and all that other kind of stuff. So there's lots of places to go. I think Etsy is a good place to go. It's often the best deal when you're purchasing. But sometimes, I mean, for templates, yes, because I think you do get a better deal than you do in some other places. Presets are always a hit or miss no matter where you get them from. Templates are pretty solid because you can see exactly what they look like. So let me just grab part of an album so you can see. Let's see, that's the whole book. I just want a plain one. I don't want anything too out of the blue. Reception. What's this one? I want something with papers in it too so that you can see. Oh, now that I'm thinking about it, on my hard drive are all those templates on there too? Crap. Okay, let's download this one. I have a whole set of templates I purchased. And I know I have them backed up somewhere, but did they end up on that? Oh, it is logged in. I just had a brain fart. I'm thinking, did all my templates get lost too? What is the deal with this computer? There we go. Okay, I'm gonna just grab this set that I downloaded. I'm gonna stick it on the server for you guys. So if you wanted to grab it, and heck, use them, I don't care. Digital editing. I'll put them under book files so we don't have too much of a mess. And it would have helped if I looked at what that was called. Album. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I just copied a zip to the server that if you wanted to copy that zip down to your desktop, you could. It's called Reception Joy Album. So it's going to be a zip file that you would double click. So if you wanted to use these, please do. When you double click the zip, it unzips it so that you get a folder. And then what you see is you see a bunch of PSD files and pages. Now, it's important to organize your files, yes. If you plan on doing things to sell to other people, your organization is even more important. Another reason why we talk about this, because other people are going to be using your files. And I have downloaded a template for an entire wedding album where nothing was labeled. Everything, layer 1, layer 2, and that was it. There were a couple of color codings. It was a nightmare. It was absolutely horrific because it's a page of like 9 images on a page. So you have all these dummy layers to put your layers on, and then the actual boxes that it clips to, and then the backgrounds and the textures and the overlays. It was a hot mess. So having organization for this, and this website's pretty good about organizing. I find a few that aren't. The only thing that drives me nuts is she's got a couple ampersands in there, and that doesn't bode well across platforms. But any one of those, now this one will be a pretty simplistic page. These don't have a whole lot of layers in it, but just to kind of show you something so you have a PSD to work with. And you probably won't have the font, so it's not the end of the world. But the way these pages are laid out, you see a bunch of guides in here, and that's basically lab-specific guides. This particular website does all their lab specs to Miller's, and I believe it'll say right on there. Yep. Designed with Miller Lab specs, so that if you send it to that particular lab, you don't have to readjust anything because their guides match their guides. So you won't lose any edges or stuff like that. But anything that falls outside of these guidelines, I'm basically guessing whether or not it'll show up when that page is printed. Because within their guides, this is guaranteed, but outside of it, it could be clipped off when they mount the page into the book. But what I have here is I have just some text on the one page. That page is pretty much left blank otherwise. And then I'm going to get this mosquito if it kills me. And then on this page, I have a couple different backgrounds. I have a picture mask, but you can see all the different, you can see all the different layers. There's not a whole lot of layers in here, but they've designed it in a way, and here's the guides too for the lab that they turn off. So they have a layer that tells you your image can't go beyond here, here's your lines to follow, make sure text stays within here, all that good stuff. So they have a guide layer that you turn off. Obviously you don't want that page printed, but then they have everything else that if I just slowly build it, I have my background layer, which is just a color. Then I have the left page, which is just a white box, the text, the line, more text. I have a dot. There we go. Oh, they have dots at the end there. Oh, she really separated that out? You could put that all in the same text line. Okay. And then we have our picture mask. And this is what becomes important, especially when you're working with templates, is knowing where those masks are. And we're going to talk about how to clip this stuff. Then there's the dummy layer. This is where you would put your image so that it snaps into the layer below. And I'll show you what that looks like and what that means. Then they just have some design stripes, and that's pretty much it. So this is very simplistic, but they can be way more complex where they have lots of graphics in the background and stuff like that. So working with this and having these layers identified or even grouped together is what we want to make sure that we fully understand. You guys know how to create a layer. You guys know how to name your layers. So that would be my expectation right now, is that you're doing that. And now we want to figure out how can we work with these layers a little bit more so that we can add images to it, we can group it, organize it, color code it if needed. And I know every instructor in fundamentals goes to a different level as far as, you know, what we do in that layer palette. And I just want to make sure everyone's to the same level and understanding with the different things that are available. So when you're working within a document, we know that this eyeball will turn on and off all of our layers. There is a quick key. I don't know if you know this, but there's a quick key that if you, like if I'm working in a, let me open Bridge here. If I have an image, maybe I'm retouching it, maybe I'm doing a bunch of stuff and I have a ton of layers in Photoshop, and I just want to see what the beginning looks like and what the end looks like. and get to this drive because I know there's a PSD somewhere. Oh, I would have a comp image. Do I have? Yeah, see, that one isn't labeled. Here, this one's got to have something. Filter, 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 build my filters. Cosby shirt and his cat. Give me my PSDs. On a PSD. Today would be the day Bob walks by and sees the picture of this kid. Come on. File, type, Photoshop. Okay. Let's see what this one has. Does this have what I want? Yeah, it's got a ton of layers. Oh, and as you use actions too, what you're going to find is you definitely want to label all your layers if you're creating your own actions, because when you go back to make adjustments, it's going to make a huge difference, because this is a handful of actions run on this image. So you've got the original image, but then you run a bunch of actions to create different effects to it, and every single one of these layers is playing a part in what that image is. So it becomes extremely important to label all of your stuff. But if you want to, if you get to the point where you have this ridiculous amount of layers here, and you want to go back to the original where you just see the background layer to see how it started and kind of do a quick snap before and after. Does anyone know what that key is? I don't know if anyone tells you this because you're doing too many other things in fundamentals. Oops, not what I wanted to do. If you hold down your Option key and you click on the layer that you want to see, it will hide the Option key, and clicking the eyeball will hide all the other layers so that you can quickly snap between that layer and then all the layers on. So it's a very quick way to turn on and off without having to start at the top and turn all the eyeballs back off and then turn them all back on. Collapse those. So Option, click, off, on. It's a very, very good key to know. Now, you'll see in this particular file that there are folders. Has anyone worked with the folders before? Maybe not. You might not have had enough layers to warrant a folder. This is actually called a group. When you have a folder of layers, it's called a group of layers. And there's a folder icon at the bottom here that will say create new group. So it's just like creating a new layer. You just create a group and then you filter those layers inside that group so that you can do exactly this. Because the biggest pain is to have all of this just in a row and have to scroll up and down to find what you're looking for. So it's just a way to collapse a bunch of layers when you're not working with them so that you have less to look at one time. But then also when you're moving layers, I know you've had to move a handful of layers at one time where you had to select all of them and you had to move them around. And maybe you're trying to move them one by one, or maybe you did command click all the ones and then move them. If you group them together, you can just grab that entire group or folder and then you can move them around as one. So it's much easier to move them around when you're grouping them. Now there's a couple ways to go about doing that when you're working with your layers. You could just create a new group down at the bottom, and then you can highlight and drag everything into that group. So I could drag into this group right here and it would move that layer. I don't necessarily want to do that. Or what you can do is, let me just, I'll undo this. Let me move this out. Okay, I gotta get up here so I can move it out. Or did I just move it in that one? Nope. So if I have a set of layers that I want to group together, I can very quickly group those together by selecting them and then just doing a Command G to create a new group. So a Command G is the quick way to do that, but honestly, I think you'll find it's a little bit quicker because then you don't have to create the new group by clicking the button and then select everything, drag it in there, and make sure it goes in there, because that's often the trick, is if you don't get the blue line in just the right spot, it doesn't go in there. That if you just select your layers and do a Command G, it will just group everything together and it automatically puts it in there. And then you can just click on that group name to change the name to whatever it is that you want. So grouping your layers is something, as you create more layers, that you probably want to do. When we get into retouching, chapter, I think it's 7 is when we do our retouching, we'll be doing a type of retouch that has a handful of layers, and you're definitely going to want to group it together. And we might even create an action of that when we talk about actions in chapter 9. So you can create that group as part of that action, so it just does it for you. And we're just going to keep using it. You'll find some instances, and maybe even in your assignment today, you might find that you might want to use groups as you're doing part of this assignment, because I kind of give you a nightmare of an album page that you have to organize because they didn't label it at all. So you might find groups work really, really well for that. So that's what the groups would be used for, just a way to organize your layers a little bit more. But the other cool thing about groups, I enjoy this. So I have this one. I'm going to crank this so you can see it a little bit more intensely. So I have this effect that's applied. It's called a campfire effect. It's an action. And it applies different colors to different parts of the image at different opacities, but then it's grouped together. And the nice thing about the group is now, as a whole, I can change the opacity of the layers within. So each layer is set to its own opacity. They're all different. But as a whole, I can take all those layers and I can take the opacity down of the layers together. So while some of them maybe are at 17% and 20%, I can now even lessen that kind of as an effect as a whole within that group by changing my opacity. And that's a huge benefit, in addition to the fact that in a group, you can add a layer mask to that group that will then mask out all of these layers together. So if I want this effect on the whole image, but not on his skin because it kind of gives it a weird tone, I could then use my layer mask with my brush, not at 5%. Now it's going to look really bad on this, but at least you'll see the extreme example. I can brush it off of him so that it is solely just the background and not his skin. So the masking capabilities within a group are still there like they would be within an entire layer. It's just a lot faster because I'm not doing every layer individually. I'm not doing the same mask to it. I'm doing it as a group, so I only have to do it once. So you're saving yourself some time. And we know that time is money. So another benefit to the groups. Now, another level of organization you might find, and now I personally don't use this enough. I should use it more, but I don't use it enough, and it is color coding your layers. You can color code it because we're all visual people, so you might find there's certain layers that I use quite a bit. So you could right-click on a layer, and right-click in the text area is really, I don't know if I can, oh yeah, I can get to it there too. The layer palette's kind of tricky because there's certain parts that you might right click on and it gives you different options than if you right click on another area. So sometimes you have to click on different spots till you find what you want. If I right click on the eyeball, it's different than if I right click right here. You can see that every single part gives you different options. So regardless of where you click for the color, at least, when you right click, you have options to set a color to your layer if you want to. So I could set this one to red because I often have to adjust that. I know that I always have to go back when I run this action. I always have to go back to the highlight and the fill to adjust. So maybe I color code it, maybe not this one. Maybe I color code it within my action when I get to that point so that it's easy to spot those two layers and I can quickly scroll down, find it, and do my adjusting to it. So you will color code, but it will color code in that eyeball is where it will color code. I don't go to the extreme where you're color coding everything. That's a waste of your time. Pick the layers that maybe you just need to stand out because you have to go back to it often and it's just easier to pinpoint it. You know, just like in week 1 when we talked about, you know, in your menus, how you can color code your menus to find it faster. It's the same stinking thing. You're just finding it in your layer palette rather than the menu. So it's the same concept. The point is to stand out so that you can find stuff. But don't color code everything. That's not worth your time. So that's available though. So as you're organizing your layers, you can color code. Again, I don't use that enough. I really should. I should write within this action because I use this action almost all the time as I'm getting ready to send images to print because it gives good contrast and clarity and creaminess to skin tones and stuff like that. So I use it all the time. I really should go back and edit the action to add these colors in my layers because I adjust those two layers every single time that I run that action. So it would be very smart of me to do that. I obviously haven't gotten to that point yet. Now, we do know, I hope, what this white box is right here in a layer. Please tell me we know what this is.
It's the masking.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. It's your layer mask. We need to know what that is. Do you use masking a lot? Now, I know the answer because I looked at your first assignment. If you don't use masking a lot now, you need to start using masking. Some of the pictures that you submitted with your eyes, when you did your eyeball, a lot of people just erased around what you didn't want for your layers. So I see the people that actually use layer mask go, what? Where you just erased around what you didn't want in the iris of your eye or in the pupil of your eye, wherever it landed. What if you make a mistake and you don't discover it until much later? You don't have a history palette to go back to undo that. You're kind of stuck. And you kind of sort of have to do it all over again at that point. I don't think you want to do that. What's our favorite word? Oh, I don't know how to word this in a way that you're going to get there because what's our favorite word when it comes to editing? That could be anything. So I'll just give it to you. Everything you want to do, make it as non-destructive as possible. Non-destructive should be your favorite word when it comes to editing. And you'll hear it all the time. I'll say it all the time. You'll hate that I say it all the time. But you should say it all the time. And then everything you answer on any sort of test related to editing, you should use the word non-destructive. That should be your favorite word. We have a lot of friends when it comes to tools in Photoshop. I always say this tool is going to be your best friend today. Non-destructive should always be your best friend in anything that you do. So layer masks make your editing more non-destructive. And by that I mean when you're trying to erase things from a certain part of an image and show things in a certain part of an image, it's non-destructive because when you screw it up, because I just did it on an order, I don't think I have the original now because I fixed it. I wish I would have saved it as a separate file. It would have been so good. It would have been an excellent example to show you guys. I had an order. Do I? I don't have it. Shoot. No, I don't have it. I had an order and it got to the point where I delivered it to the client. And that's when we discovered that I royally screwed something up. And I didn't even see it when I looked at the print to make sure the print looked okay. In this picture, now I fixed it so you can't see it, but in this picture, When I delivered the 8x10, she goes, "What's this?" And I'm like, son of a, I knew exactly what it was right away. I thought it was just a mark on the image when I first glanced at it. And I'm like, oh no, I know what that is. There was this line that went across his face. And it went from the corner of this eye in the whites of his eyes. And it was like this white streak that went across his face. And I didn't notice it. I didn't notice it when because it was at 5%. What it was it was my Photoshop brush, and my computer was lagging a little bit as I was editing. So I keep clicking, and my fan sounds like an airplane, and I'm keep editing, and then my computer's trying to catch up, and it didn't catch one of the points where I hit the shift key and let go of the shift key, and it actually drew a line with my brush when I was drawing the corners of his eyes with a very faint white brush. And then I went down to do his teeth, and it drew a line across his face because somewhere in there I held down the shift key for something else, and while it was catching up, it caught the shift key in the wrong spot, so it drew a straight line across his face at 5% opacity with a white brush, and I never saw it because it was so faint. But we could only see it in the 8x10. You can't see it in the 5x7s and the 4x6s. You can't see it. But it was very obvious in the 8x10, and she saw it immediately. I'm like, shoot, how did it get to that point? And I didn't notice it. So I had to go back and take it out. Now, if I didn't use layers, when I did that, I would have had to start all over and start the retouch from scratch. If I didn't use a layer mask, I would have been even more screwed, and I would have had to start all over. Come on in. Yeah, go for it. So that is kind of a big issue. And what saved me was the fact that it was on a separate layer and it was a layer mask. Now, the layer mask didn't really come into play with this one. However, I've had situations where it was similar to that for something else, like a texture overlay, and the layer mask is what saved me. So you need to make this as non-destructive as possible. Everything should be on separate layers. You should almost immediately want to either duplicate your background if you need to do something right on that pixel layer, or you should just be automatically creating blank layers. Because if you're doing anything on the background layer, you are probably potentially screwing yourself over for later on. But that layer mask will save you. Because exactly this, when I just did that example where I wanted to take this ridiculously oversaturated effect off of his skin tones, when I brushed that, I did a real sloppy job of it. And if I go back and turn that on and off, now I don't know how well you can see it, but like where his arms are, where the building comes in between his arms, I didn't pay close attention to that, and I need to go back and fine tune that. If I didn't have a layer mask, if I simply was just erasing that effect, I'm done for. If I had saved and closed this and came back 2 days later, totally done for. So now, having that layer mask, I'm saving myself some headache for later on. Yeah, you can see it. I completely brushed over that, and I did a really poor job there. And I know I went over the edges here. Like, I did really bad when I did that. So if I have to fine-tune any of that stuff, I need that layer mask there. So if you are not using layer masks, we need to talk about that. And we need you to start using layer masks. So I'm trying to think the question and how I want to ask this. When we use a layer mask, what tools are we often using to show and hide parts of the image? Because that's the point of the layer mask. You should all know that. We're revealing and concealing parts of an image when we create the mask.
Brushes and then selection tools?
Ah, yes. Brushes and selection tools. That's exactly it. You can use a brush, you can select out part of an image first and then create the layer mask, and it will mask out based on that selection. Or if we're fine-tuning stuff, we could use brushes. We need to be using brushes and selection tools. So in a layer masks operate in solely black and white. What's the difference between black and, wrong key. What's the difference between black and what's the difference between white? This is what my mask looks like. Looks like a sad stick person.
White is everything it's editing, right?
Yes. So the white is showing or revealing what's in the layer. In this case, everything inside this group. So black is doing the opposite. It's hiding. So black conceals, white reveals, black conceals. If that little rhythm / rhyme helps you remember, great. White reveals, black conceals. It's like wearing white and black clothing. Black conceals and slims a person, and white reveals, and often in photos makes people appear whiter. So white will show through what you're trying to do. Black will hide the parts that you want to hide. And if you ever need to see that, to see what your mask looks like, you hold down your Option key and click the layer mask icon itself. You can temporarily disable, let's see, is it Shift? Yep. You can temporarily disable a layer mask to see what it looks like, kind of like as a before-after for just that layer if you want to, by holding down your Shift key and clicking on it, and you'll get a big red X through it. Not that you remember that, because I often forget that too, but I know it's one of those keys. It's either Command, Option, or Shift. So you've got a fair chance of figuring it out if you remember that the Command, Option, and Shift all do something for a layer mask. Command will actually select out your layer mask, which is awesome for copying. Option will show you the layer mask, and Shift will temporarily turn it on and off. So if you got those, you're good. Okay. So we can use our brush, you can use the eraser tool if you want to in the layer mask. Just know that it's the opposite of what you're thinking. So if you're erasing something in a mask and you want to erase the black, you have to swap your foreground and background colors from what you would use with a brush. So brush or eraser tool is going to do the exact same thing in a layer mask. It's just you're using the opposite color to do one or the other. So it doesn't really matter what tool you use. I much prefer the brush because I want to brush away a part or brush in a part. So in my head that makes sense. But for you, the eraser tool might make more sense, and go ahead and use that if that's what you want. Just know that you're either erasing the white by adding black, or you're erasing the black by adding white. So whatever works. Oh, what else do we know about layer masks? There's some buttons in here that you have probably never pushed before. And there's some buttons you will never push, so I won't even bother talking about those. But the buttons that you may push, that you may find useful, I want to show you what they will do. We have, okay, you guys know your blend modes fall underneath there? That little drop down? That's good. There are some quick keys. Now, I myself forget them, but I believe it is it Command Option plus? No, I'm thinking my quick keys here. No. Option plus. I'm trying to remember. Option, Command Shift. No. There are some quick keys, and I always forget them, and maybe you remember them and I don't, that will let you filter up and down so that you can cycle through these without having to go to that drop-down menu. I always forget what they are, to be honest. It's a quick key I should know, being so OCD about knowing quick keys as I am, but it's one that I can never remember. But if you don't know your blend modes well, you will want to get to know your blend modes well. And I want to give you a page number here in your book. Page 534 for the next handful of pages goes through every blend mode and will show you what each of those blend modes does. So it has 3 images that it overlays on top of each other. And let me see if I have the book files for this chapter actually, because I believe he has that graphic in there for chapter 8 that you can play around with it to see what it does yourself too, if you would rather. Book files. Did I just move the whole thing? I'm losing my mind. Okay, it's not in that one. Let's do spring of 18. Editing book files. No, I didn't do chapter 8. Okay. I can go to that website. But I believe if you were to go to that link that I put in Blackboard to download the book files, I believe he has that actual graphic in there so you can see how it blends with, it's more like a cloudy layer blending with his colored layer, and you can see what it does. It's a really good example, but the book will give you the visual at least. Not that I expect you to say, well, which one blends with 50% gray and has no effect and does overlay with this and does screen with this. Like, I'm not going to ask you that because nobody knows that. I mean, if you know that, I will bow down, but you don't need to know that. Every image is going to have a different effect. It's going to blend differently on every image based on the color and stuff like that. And you often are just eyeballing it. I mean, you can get a starting point. When you look at this drop-down menu, you're going to see these little lines in between certain blend modes. And it's basically grouped together because this set of blend modes does similar things. They all have a different intensity and different output, but they will be similar in what they are doing compared to this area with lighten. You're going to always get a lighter result with what you're doing, or more on the lighter parts of your image are what's going to be affected with these blend modes. Whereas in darken, multiply, color burn, you're either going to get a darker result or it's affecting the darker parts of your image. So they group them together for that reason. So if you're going for, I want to do this with my image, you can guarantee that those set of blend modes, one of those are probably going to do what you want to do. So that's why they're grouped in such a way. But most of the time you're just kind of playing until you get that look that you want. So it's hard to say you must use overlay for this. You must use, I can't do that. I can't do that for you. I'm sorry. But I want you to at least be familiar with, what would one do over the other? Would screen mode give me a lighter result, or would multiply mode give me a lighter result when I blend? Can anyone tell me that right now? If I want a lighter result for something I'm blending with an image, would screen or multiply get me there? Screen. Screen is overlaying the lighter parts of my image, so anything that falls, let's see, middle gray or lighter, 50% gray as it'll probably say in your book, or lighter, it's going to basically give you that inverse and blend that color and lighten the blacks while the lighter parts just get even more intensified. So if you kind of know those basics, that's really all you need. You're okay. I didn't clip out my umbrella in this corner here. Now the buttons that I want to push out here, or point out here, not push out, are these lock buttons. There's only a couple that I want to talk about. And it is the first one, which is lock transparent pixels. Obviously, we have the lock to lock everything. But when you're working in an image, I don't know if you've ever locked anything before or had a reason to do it. Anyone? Anyone ever have to lock layers for any reason whatsoever? No. Okay. As you work with more and more layers, you're going to find you might, especially if you have text and stuff. And if you're the person that chooses to keep this auto select layer box checked. Oops, I was still zoomed in. If you choose to keep this auto select selected, and so every time you click on your image, it just automatically switches and selects that layer, whatever you click on. I click around a lot, so I turn that off. But if you have that on, you don't want to accidentally click and drag something that you don't want to drag. So you may find a need, if you like auto select, you may find a need that white background layer, I don't want to accidentally move that. I could lock that layer by clicking the lock icon so that when I do stuff, I can't move that layer. I can't accidentally click and drag it like I can that one or the text. You might want to lock it. However, there are some cool reasons to lock transparent pixels. And I'm trying to think what would be the easiest way to show that for you. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to use a brush on just a blank layer. And you can certainly try this as we're doing it if you want, because I think you might find benefit in this. But if I'm brushing something, so I'm painting something, I'm making this fantastic whatever, and I'm going to make it all blotchy, and I don't know, it's going to become a background. Trust me, it'll look cool. But I decide this is not the right color. I need a different color. How could I change the color of what I have already brushed? Now I've brushed black on top of it, which makes it so much worse to try and change. But does anyone know how I could change that color?
Could you right click and select all the pixels and then
I could.
adjust it?
Yes, I could. Yes, I could if I wanted to. Oops, I got my brush here. Yeah, well actually, I don't know about right clicking.
I think you have to click on the layer.
Yeah, if you click on the layer and you command click the layer, it will select all the pixels within the layer. So I've created a selection for that layer. So command clicking the layer selects it, and then I could just fill it with another color. I could definitely do that. So I could pick another color. Who knows the quick key to fill with foreground and background color? This is an important one to know too. So my foreground, background colors, whatever I select here, if I want to fill with this red that I have selected, there are two keys to know: Option delete and Command delete. So Option delete will fill with a foreground color. Command delete will fill with the background color, and I can see my selecting here. My command clicking didn't do very well. So Option delete foreground, Command delete background. Now if you need a way to remember which is which, now I don't know if it's because I'm left-handed or what, but I use the Option and Command key on the left side of the keyboard often.
Option delete is what?
Option delete is fill with foreground. And
then command delete is what?
is fill with background. So right now white is my background color.
Okay.
Command delete would fill with white. Option delete would fill with red, because red's my foreground. Now the way I remember that is on the left-hand side of the keyboard, Option is on the left, and in Photoshop, the foreground color is kind of to the left because they're on an angle. So that's the left, that's the right. So I remember my Option key is first on the left-hand side of my keyboard, so I know that that's my foreground, and Command is on the right side, so Command is my background. That's how I remember it. I don't know if that helps you at all. If it does, awesome. But it could just be that I'm left-handed and I use those keys, because if you use it on the right-hand side of the keyboard, it's the opposite. So you'll quickly discover if it's wrong. You just undo it and use the other key. But Option delete foreground, Command delete background. And that will just fill with those colors and make your life a little bit easier. So if I want to fill, I can definitely use those keys. I can make a selection and I can use those keys. Now I can also, whoops, let me undo my selection here. I can also do something that is lock transparent pixels. So that very first lock option here, if I click that, you'll see that my lock icon looks a little bit different, because lock all is a completely filled in lockbox, where I'm only locking part of an image with one of these options. You'll see it's a see-through lock. It's not filled in. Now, if I wanted to fill with red, I could do Option delete on that layer, but it's going to fill the whole layer. If I click lock transparent pixels, what it does is prevents me from doing anything with transparent pixels. So all this see-through area right here, it's locking those so that I can't do anything with them. And then if I do my option delete to fill with foreground color, it now fills that layer, just those parts, with that red that I've selected. So you might find use in that. I have used that often. Some people will say, well, why can't I just use at the bottom our effects and then just fill with a color overlay? You could do that as long as your color overlay is going to be that color at a normal blend mode at 100%. If you're going to blend that in any way, shape, or form, if I want to blend this layer, I want to use darken, what you're going to see, well, actually, I need an image to be able to do this. Maybe I'll try overlay. But if you're going to blend this, when you have a color overlay set to 100% and normal, it's not going to blend the way you want to. Now, if I turn it off, I can see that my blend mode works because I have a red layer, so it works just fine. But using a color overlay eliminates the option of using blend modes here. And if I use a blend mode in color overlay, it's blending with the black that's underneath. So it's not, oh, and I still have this. Let me go back here. So the red is going to blend with the original black color, but I had red on red, so I guess it worked in that case. But it would blend with the original color, not with the layers underneath. So I'm posing a little bit of an issue there by using color overlay if I want to do blend modes. Not to say that you can't do it that way, because it absolutely is an option. It's just if I want that to blend underneath here, I can't do that. So I would end up having to change the color of that layer. And using the lock transparent makes that just a little bit easier to do. So that's what it would use. Now, there are some other ones here. You have lock image pixels, lock position. So that would be a way to lock the layer so that you can't necessarily move it, but you can do other things to it. You have a lock artboard option, and then you just have the lock all. I find everyone that I have talked to, they're pretty much using lock all, lock transparent, and then some people will lock image pixels, but that's few and far between because it's completely different from what we're talking about. So mostly lock transparent and lock all is what I find people using. So I wanted to make sure that I pointed those out to you. Those are good to use. But honestly, from the layer, using the layers, that's kind of the majority of it. I mean, we can talk about effects and stuff like that, but I don't think that we need to talk about that right now. I think that will come later on when we're doing some other things and we're doing more with masking and stuff like that. So I'm not going to necessarily worry about that, the layer effects at this point, because we'll play with them more later on. We'll play with them later. My brain is fried. Okay, how much time do I have here? I just want to make sure that we talk about a few certain things, but I want to get you a few channels, as I'm looking at the channels thing. I want to make sure we talk about a few other things here in this chapter. I just want to get you a page number for what I want to talk about. How do you feel about the select and mask tool? Do you hate it?
I like them.
It's gotten better.
To be honest, I'm not as used to it.
It takes a little bit.
Because I don't use it as much, but I think if I would use it more, then I think I would.
Yeah, I think if you use it enough,
then I would be fine with it.
yeah, it definitely is a tool to practice with. It's not an easy one to master. I still have problems every once in a while when I'm using the select and mask tool.
Right.
But I think if you practice enough with it, you'll kind of get it down what it's trying to do. But I don't know, were you introduced to the choose subject button? Some of you who had it last semester, you might have, but if you had Photoshop prior, because The most recent version, or the version that, well, I guess we just had an incremental version.
I had Photoshop last semester and I
Okay.
was not introduced to that.
Okay. So in one of the last two incremental updates to Photoshop, they added the most beautiful button in the entire world. And it's called Choose Subject. It's amazing. I'm going to duplicate this so that I can go back to the original image here. Delete all this stuff. Okay, so there's a button. So if I use my quick selection tool and I go to that, there it used to just have select and mask in here. They have now added a button that says select subject. It is an amazing tool. It seriously does such a good job. Now, I haven't tried it on an image like this, where it's got quite a bit going on behind the subject itself, but it will find the subject and it will select it. So just clicking that button, let's see how it does with this image. It did. Seriously. It just selected him out of the entire background. Now I have to fine tune this, so I'm gonna have to go into select and mask and fine tune it. But dang it, that's awesome. That's saving me so much time using my quick selection tool. I now don't have to go and select him out. I can just hit this choose subject and bam, it finds it in this background. It's such a cool thing. So it's such a time saver. The algorithm that was designed with it is really well done, that I might use my quick selection tool here to clean up a little bit before I go into select and mask, but depending on the background and how busy it is, it does an awesome job that I really don't have to do a whole lot here. So, I mean, I do have to add in a little bit where it didn't quite get all of the chair, but I can just kind of go through quick and add in and take out certain parts here. That, add that, take out that. And we know that to toggle back and forth between adding and subtracting from a selection is what button? Oh man, do we not know this? Oh, this is important. If I'm using a masking tool and I want to add to the selection, I can just draw and add because it has a little plus sign. But how do we take away part of a selection? Someone's gotta know it.
You can click the button at the top.
You can. You can click the button at the top. But man, that's extra time.
Isn't it the option button?
It is. Ding, ding, ding. It's the option button. The option will toggle back and forth. You see it changes from a plus to a minus, or let me get it in a spot where you can see it. It changes from a plus to a minus. So the option key will change it so that it subtracts out parts of an image, and then if I let go, it automatically goes back to the plus so that I can add and subtract parts of my selection. So I want to take out this part because I need his, I need his arm, but not the building. So the option key is awesome for that. So I'm fine-tuning this more than I need to. I wouldn't go to this extent, but I'm just doing it as we're talking about how to do the different parts.
So the option key takes it away, and then you can take the option key to put it back to add to.
When you let go of the option key, it automatically goes back. So it just toggles. So if I had the subtract from selection selected, the option key would then do nothing. It's supposed to toggle. Maybe it's this tool. It does toggle, I promise you that, but maybe not with the quick selection tool. But when you do have the add to selection selected, the option key will toggle to subtract, and then letting go will go back to add. So it does make that process of selecting a heck of a lot quicker. So choose subject. When it comes to selecting, it's one of your best friends. But then I can go into select and mask. And then yes, this tool is, in the upgrade where they added choose subject or the select subject button in here, notice too when I go to select and mask, select subject is an option in there too. So if I don't select it before, I can select it in select and mask. But when they change some of the algorithms with it, that I find the select and mask does work a bit better now that they've changed some of the background stuff going on in there. So when I go into my subject here and I want to take away, when I want to refine stuff, I can add and I can take away stuff. Yeah, Brandon? You can come in. I've got class till 12:30. But you can certainly come in and work. They're not full classes. So I can, with I've got my quick selection tool, I've got my refine edge brush, which is often the one that everyone hates. But with my refine edge brush, I can add and take away certain parts. And that's where the option key will probably come into play here, where you're trying to take some stuff away. And I can see this busy background is just going to become a nightmare with taking stuff away. Let's see if I can get it to do anything. I'm going to do what I want you to do. Yeah, this busy background is going to be not fun for the select and mask tool because there's so many different colors in here that it's going to pick it up. I'm not going to be able to select him out as easy as I want to. But if I kind of toggle back and forth here, I might eventually get there. I have often found that brushing over the background works better than trying to select from the subject side. So if I can see if I can get that to work a little bit. There we go. But it is a lot of back and forth. So it's kind of hard to explain exactly what you're going to end up doing with it because it does depend on your background. Like this image is just going to suck is what it's going to come down to because of the background and how he's got darker clothes on with darker elements, lots of different competing colors in this image, that it's gonna be a bit of a pain. And I didn't set some of my stuff here either. So I'm not gonna spend a lot of time playing around with this because I know you've done it before. It's just practice and playing around to get used to it. It's the choose subject that I wanted to make sure that you got. Have you guys selected by color range before? I think that's an important selection tool. We will probably use that a bit more when we are retouching, but I'll point it out now because you might find benefit in using it later on. So the color range tool I find really important when we're masking. Let's say I'm just trying to smooth out his skin on this particular image. You could use any image for that. Maybe I want to change the color of the sky. I want my sunset to be a slightly different color. So I could select out just the yellows and change the yellows if I want to. But, you know, in this case, let's say I just want to select out his skin tones. I want to do a skin smoothing technique with it. I'm gonna mask it out. This is what I want to do. I want to show you how it works with a layer mask. So I'm just going to duplicate the background for now. I would have used a smart layer, but it'll do the same thing. I'm just going to apply a filter. I'm going to do the blur. I'm going to do a smart, or should I do a surface? I'm going to do a surface blur. I'm just going to do a surface blur, just enough to kind of smooth out his skin here. I think this is a little bit too much. Take that down. Okay, just enough to kind of smooth that out. But when I do this, I'm applying it to the entire image. I only want it to apply to his skin. So I want to mask that out. This is where your layer mask is extremely powerful, is when you're doing stuff like this. So because I have applied this to the entire image, I now have smoothed some of the texture in the background, and I don't want that. Even though it's so slight, you probably can barely tell on here. But I want to apply a layer mask. So I'm going to click my layer mask icon at the bottom. And then when I click on my layer mask, oops, my properties should have come up, but they didn't. I want to make sure my layer mask is selected, so when I do my color range, it's going to do what I want it to do. But I want to make sure that I have the properties panel open. That's important. The properties panel, when it comes to a layer mask, gives us a lot of options. I've got my select and mask options. I've got invert options, which are good, feathering, which we'll use. But for this instance, I want to use color range. Now in a layer mask, this is where you'll find color range. However, at any point, you can go under the select menu and select color range. So you can select at any time. I'm just doing this through a mask so I can kind of show you two things at once. So if I hit color range, what I can do in color range is I can sample a color in my image. And in this case, I want to sample his skin tones. So I can click that, and you'll see here's an example of what it's selecting. So it's showing you what I'm selecting. The thing you want to pay attention to in color range is fuzziness slider. I just like the name of it. But sometimes fuzziness is set low by default, depending on who played with the computer last. But what it does, think of it as like almost like a feathering, kind of like a range option, where the color you click on, it's how many colors outside of that it's picking up is what it is. So the higher I drag it, the more colors that are similar to the one I sampled, it's picking up. Now I just want his skin tone, so I'm going to start pretty low, and I can hold down, I can either use this plus eyedropper to add, or I just hold down my shift key and you'll see my eyedropper turns to a plus, and I just keep clicking to add until I get all the colors picked up that I want. I'm missing some in his legs here, so I want to pick that up, and his arm. And I don't want the background, so I'm going to drag this down a little bit. So I'm not going to get just his skin in this. I'm going to pick up some of the background, so I'm going to have to fine tune it a little bit later. However, I can very quickly select his skin rather than trying to brush through it and find all the pieces. So if I get that far, I can hit OK. It creates my layer mask. Ta-da! So that it's just his skin is showing through. So the effect is white where his skin is, because that's what I want to reveal, but I'm concealing the background, so the background is black. That's what I want. Now if I want to take it out of those background areas, I could do one of two things. I could just take my brush and kind of eyeball it, and I want to hide the effect, and I have some of the white, you can see right here. You can see where it's white and showing through. I want to hide it in some of those areas. So I could take my brush with black. So right now my white is my foreground color. How do I swap foreground and background colors? I want black as the color to brush. And right now black's my background, so I want to switch those two around. Nope. You can.
Delete, right?
Oh, that would be to fill. Yes, you would be right for fill. That would be filling. But I don't want to fill my layer with white. I want to swap my foreground and background colors. There's an arrow button here that will swap those. I could click that, but we're quick key people. Or you will be, because I'm going to shove it down your throats. You hit the X key. And X kind of makes sense because you're swapping. So if you need the arm movements to go with it, I'll be Vanna for you. You're swapping and it's an X. I don't know, that's how I remember. I have to remember things in weird ways. We have too many things to remember, so the weirder the better. So that's how we swap. So we swap our foreground and background with the X key. And now I have black as my foreground, so I can just brush. As I get to those smaller areas, now this effect is so subtle, it's not going to be a big deal. I probably could have left it. No one's going to say, oh my gosh, look how smooth that cloud is back there. Like, no one's going to care. But if I have things where it is a little bit more defined, and I really do have to be picky, that might be one of those instances where I option click so I can see it. And now I can brush out those parts. And I can be like, yep, I don't want any of that, and kind of get around him a little bit better. Or those areas that I missed on his skin, I can hit my X key to bring my white to my foreground and brush it back in. Again, this is so subtle that it's in this particular image, it's not an issue. but it might be an issue in other images. So now I can hit my X key and go back and get rid of all this. So, I mean, there's different ways I could have done it. This is potentially a long way. I could have just done a quick lasso around him. Oops, that was really bad. Done a quick lasso here, inverted my selection and filled it with black, and that's part's done. And then all I have to do is brush here to get these areas. So I could do it that way. Lots of different ways to do it, but you kind of get the idea, at least of how you could adjust that. So that would be color range, selecting those specific colors, the range of colors surrounding the ones that I'm choosing. And I could create a layer mask from that. I could just simply create a selection and change the color of that selection. That's kind of the idea behind it. So color range is awesome. This example had a bunch of different colors, so sometimes if you have clearer background, foreground, whatever, it's a little bit easier. Okay, so with the time I have left, I want to show you the pen tool, and then one more thing when working within the layers, more specifically to templates, because you'll need it for your assignment. So the evil pen tool. Did I ask if anyone used the pen tool before? Yes, I did. I did ask you that. Okay, if you have never used the pen tool, I need to find a different image because this one just is not going to work for that. Let's see here. I know I have book files for another chapter that it might work better. Here, let's use the airplane. Okay, let me transfer this over. All right, it's gonna be a pain, so I'm just gonna do this. All right, digital editing, come on. This is a book file for chapter 7, but I'll stick it in there. If you want to use this, this would probably be a good example for the pen tool because it's got a simple background. If you want to play with the pen tool as we're talking about it, so you kind of get the feel for it, please go ahead. You can use any image. I'm just going to use the one from in the book files, the airplane one, because it has a very simple background, so it's easy to show and see. So let me bring this up. It's also a low res, so we can only get so close to it. But like I said, the pen tool is definitely used more in vector. You may come across a time where you have to use it. Oftentimes it would be the designer that's using your image and doing it themselves. However, if you find this as an easy way to select stuff out, please use it. You will practice this in your assignment, but who knows how often you'll use it after that. So the pen tool basically will allow you to select. So if I show you what it does, you basically put points and you're allowed to draw curves, click to draw straight lines, and we can select out part of an image. So this part, oh, that's not doing what I want it to do. Click and drag, there we go. So I can draw around curves. The only thing that it's not gonna do is like if you have fine lines like hair and stuff like that. Like this is not going to be good for that. This is things that have really good defined edges. And all we have to do is basically come all the way around to make the shape and connect the dots. We're literally connecting dots is what we're doing. But when I work with the pen tool, I do want to be pretty particular as to where my edges are and what I'm selecting. So you find a spot to click, and that's your anchor point. That's your first anchor point that you're setting. Then you just go to, you have to get a feel for edges, and until you practice it enough, it'll be hard to figure out where you would click next. So you want to, like, this is a pretty straight line here. It's slightly curved. So just knowing from doing this enough, I would probably click over here. And then I'm going to click and hold just to see for a second where my line is. Now, maybe this is a bad image because I have a blue sky and it's drawing blue lines. So I don't know how well you can see that. Let me change the color of my background for a second so that it's a little bit easier to see. Blues. Let's just make it purple. Orange? Why not? There we go. Okay, we got a different color background now. This will make it easier to see. So if I click here and I click over here, you can see my blue line maybe is slightly above it, the wing of the plane has a slight curve to it. So if I click the second point and actually pull out, I get what's called these two anchor points. I'm using kind of like a Bezier tool is what I'm using. And what this allows me to do is change and match the curve of what I'm trying to select to the curve of the line. So I don't have to do much because it's just a real slight curve, but I'm just trying to get that to match that wing. So it's just a real slight curve. Now, the trick is once you draw that, once you pull out those anchor points, if you have to change the direction of what you're selecting, like now I have a tiny little knob on the plane, it's probably a light or something on the plane that I need to select around. When I draw that next point, you can see it's drawing a really weird curve. I need to, what's called delete that anchor point right here. I need to get rid of that so that I can change the direction of what I'm selecting or select a new point. So the thing you just need to know is you click the Option key, hold the Option key and click on that anchor point, and you'll see what happens is it deletes that one that was sticking out over here. This one's still here, but it deletes this one because the one that pulls out to the right, or I'm selecting to the right, so as I'm going right, the anchor point that's out to the right will affect where my next point is and how it selects. So now when I select, I basically am like starting from scratch. So I click the Option key every time I change direction with my selection tool or with my pen tool, so that and where it's a straight line, I just click and it draws a straight line. But like I need to get around the propeller here, so I would draw that out. But when I go up around this part of the propeller, I need to get rid of this point here, this anchor point, in order to avoid having this problem where it's curving in. So I need to Option click to get rid of that so that I can get the next point. And again, this is just going to come with practice. All you have to know is you have to pull that out to get the shape of the curve that you want. You'll eventually learn, if you use it often enough, how to get those shapes and what direction you have to go to get those shapes. And you just always undo if need be in order to get the shape that you want. And then pretty soon you become comfortable with the selection tool and you can just click away and you're quickly selecting out exactly what it is you're trying to select. Whoops, I needed to curve that a little bit. So it's going to take practice. You're just going to have to play with it. But let me just when you are trying to close the loop on your selection or on your pen tool, you have to get all the way back up to the point that you started at. The point that you start at will show up when you get to that point. If I kind of make this part look good at least. When you get to that point and you're ready to close that loop, it will show a circle next to the pen tool instead of a plus or any other symbol. It'll show a circle so that you know that once I do that, my loop is closed and I have made my selection. So I now have a half good, half bad selection of my airplane. And I can do different things with that. I can change this into an actual selection if I want to. Right now, this is acting as a path. So you are going to need the path palette when you work with the pen tool. So if the path palette's not visible with the layers, you have to go under Window and select Paths. but it should be there. And here's what you're going to see. This is just a working path. So it's like a temporary selection that's pretty much doing nothing right now. I can change this to an actual selection, like marching ant selection. I can save it as a path to use later on. I can make clipping paths from it. That's more used when I need to clip out the background or place this in other things. There's lots of different things to do with it. So one of the things you want to do is you want to save this working path so that I can go back to it later. You can create a path at any time, call it back up later on, and use it for whatever you need to use it. So if I need to do some things to an image, retouch it, I have it selected out with the path tool, and now I want to swap out the background or create a layer mask from it or whatever it is. I can go back and select that path. Because the second I deselect this path, you'll see it goes away on my image. But I can always click here and it's there. But once I close Photoshop and open it back up, if I didn't save that path will not be there. So, on this work path right here, if you double click that path, it'll bring up an option for Save Path. And then I can give it a name, Airplane. Now it's saved. Working paths are temporary. Double clicking will allow you to give it a name and save it. And now I have a path that every time I open up this document as a Photoshop or TIFF, depending on how I save it, JPEG will compress it and get rid of it, but a Photoshop or TIFF, as I'm working on it, I will be able to call that path back up. Now here's how you can use it for selections. In the path palette, we have some buttons across the bottom here. You'll see I have, like, I can fill it with my foreground color, but the one you will use probably more than anything is load path as a selection. It's the third one from the left. And when I click that, it takes my path and makes a selection out of it. Now there's one thing that you can consider when you're changing it to a path, and that's option clicking when you click that button. You don't have to do that. However, I want you to know that you have the option of feathering it, because depending on how that path selected it, you may need a little bit of a feather to have a little give. If you don't want it real sharp edged selection, you might want to feather. So you're just going to have to option click that make selection from path button. You want to option click that. Then you can set a pixel radius. You might not need that, and that's fine. Then you can just click it. But now I have a selection. So now that I have a selection, I can go in the layers palette, and maybe I want to just adjust curves. With a selection, I can click the curves button, and look, it automatically creates the mask from my selection. You just use the selection as you need a selection. Now I can do whatever I want. Let's make this guy. There we go. So now I can do whatever it is that I need to do with it. It's just another selection tool. If you have hard edges on something, this may make it go faster. But I want you to know that that's there. One, because I want you to practice it on your assignment, but two, some people are going to find it more beneficial than others. And three, if you do commercial editorial photography, you may be the one that has to do these selections yourself. So that's why we point it out. Okay, you okay with that so far? I have one more thing to show you and then I'm done. And that has to do with templates, because you need this for your assignment. I'm actually going to open your assignment so that I can walk you through it as we talk about it. So let me get into Blackboard. I am providing you for your assignment this week. I'm giving you the images that you need. So there is a folder to download, and I have the link on Blackboard. I can put it in, I can put it on the server if you would rather, but otherwise use the link on Blackboard here. Come Come on, Blackboard, you can do it. Okay, so what you will find for this assignment, okay, so I have the assignment link there, and then underneath that, you will see the Google Drive link. That's what you need to download. This is a zip. You want to download the entire zip is what you want to do. So if you plan on doing this at home, you might want to download it here because it might be faster to download. Yes, it'll ask, it can't scan for viruses because of how big it is. Just hit download anyway. It's 155 megabytes, so depending on your internet connection will depend on how fast or slow it downloads, but it shouldn't take too long. Let me unzip. There we go. So you have a set of files in here, and let me open up the assignment so I can kind of walk you through and then show you this last part right here. So there are 3 main things that you need to do. You're going to submit 3 PSD files for this assignment. The first thing does have to do with organizing, labeling, whatever you feel is necessary, but this is also a potential live client coming back to you saying, can we make these adjustments? This is an example of a page in a wedding album that has been laid out for you. So you're going to get a PSD file. It says 10 by 12 album page PSD. And you have been given worst case scenario here where nothing is labeled. Absolutely nothing is labeled. And there's a ton of layers because there's 10 images, 10 placeholders, and a bunch of other things going on in the background. So what you have to do first is you have to figure out how to organize, label, title, whatever it is, every single one of these layers. You can use whatever works for you. I'm going to show you a grouping thing, so that might help you title it a certain way once I show you this. You can color code. I want you to color code something, but you don't have to do every layer. You can kind of decide. Then once you've organized everything, you are going to be using smart objects for this assignment. So what this client has said is they want a couple of images swapped out in this document. They're like, can we take out this one and put this one in instead? And what you're going to do is make that swap. So to make that swap, let me kind of show you what you're going to do here. First of all, you're going to see these little arrow keys. Do you know what these little arrows mean? We have a layer and you have an arrow pointing down to this layer.
It's linked to that layer, right?
It is, yeah, it's a way of linking. It's called clipping. We have clipped that layer, this top layer, with the layer below. When we use templates, we use this a lot. So I have a box and I want to put a picture in that box. I have a picture. Oddly enough, I have a picture. Here's my picture. My picture is bigger than that box. And in templates, yes, we could just mask it to the shape of the box. However, to make editing a lot quicker and changing things a lot faster, we often use the boxes or whatever and we clip to it, which acts as a layer mask. And it just makes switching out those pictures a lot quicker. So what I do is in between the 2 layers, this is what you have to remember to do this assignment. So you may want to write it down instead of play on your phones again. I don't know why you guys think I can't see you playing on your phones the entire class. You option click in between the 2 layers and you get a little down arrow and a box. And when you option click, it clips. So basically it's acting like a layer mask. This layer I can move around still and do whatever I want, but it only shows within the pixels of the layer below, and in this case it's a box. So it shows in the layers below. So I'm clipping it to that layer. And that's just a quick way to lay out to template something. So I can make a whole bunch of different boxes, and that was that other example that I downloaded and just had open for you guys, this other page. I have a box, and all I have to do is clip the layer below it What some templates will do, and I'm just gonna place a file inside here. Let me just grab an image here. No, not that one, that one. If I grab an image and I want to place it in here, so I place that image, I want to clip it inside this box here. This layer is down here. Let me hit enter. This layer is down here. I want to clip it inside this box. This is that black box right there. What some templates will do is they'll have a dummy layer. It just says paste your picture under this layer. So if I move my layer in between those two, it automatically clips it for me. It's just saving me the click is all it is, but you can manually click that if you want. So some templates you get have just a dummy blank layer. This serves no purpose aside from being the in-between point, basically. I put my layer in between there and it automatically clips. So now my picture only shows within this space. So if I want to now resize it, yeah, Stacy, go ahead.
So then do we have to label the dummy layer?
You will be layering the dummy layer. Yep. You can just call it kind of like that sample. Place image below. Kind of as a direction more than anything else. What some templates you find will do where they color code that layer so that you know that's the one, place it right below that. Or some will color code the boxes and you know to clip it above it. So you can, maybe your color coding will come in below or, based on one of those two things. So yeah, this example has those dummy layers in it. And you want to leave them because you are creating a template. Or using an existing template, I should say.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's under the downloads, how do I get it to the desktop so I can save it to my?
If you have your downloads folder open, just drag it to the desktop itself. Just
Yeah,
grab the
that's
whole
what-
folder and
that's
move
what
it.
I was doing, but it's not. Maybe it is not.
You could have
Okay.
grabbed the wrong point.
I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So that's what those little arrows mean, and that's how you clip it. Now, because everything in this document is a smart object, I've supplied you with the images they want to switch to. So there's 2 images here that they want to swap to, and I tell you in the document which one and where. Now to switch that, because it's a smart object, all you have to do is that layer, so if this is the one that I have to switch here, that smart layer icon that's to the lower right of the thumbnail, if I right click that, and that's the trick here, oops, I lie. Did it not do it? Is it because I'm zoomed in? Why is it not doing it? Oh, okay, I lied. I always do that. If I right click the layer, like by the name, I'm sorry, not the icon, I will get an option that says replace contents. That's what you need to know. So click where the name is or in the blank space to the right, replace contents. By doing that, when I go to that folder, wherever I put it, here we go. If this is the image I'm replacing it with, I hit the place button, it just swaps it for me. So it keeps it clipped, it keeps it in the same position, and it just swaps out the image. So right click, replace contents, important to know. And then I can move it around in here, I can transform it if I need to, Command T to change the size. Hold the Shift key when you transform. I don't know why I say it 1,000 times. And then every assignment I have somebody who submits something like this, where it's just squished in. Don't do that. Hold down the Shift key when you transform so it stays in proportion. And then just fit it in the square as best as you can. So you're going to do that with it. So you got 2 images you have to swap out. And then they also want the images on the ends in the bottom row swapped. So these 2 images, they want just this one to go over here and this one to go over here. So you're going to have to unclip the background or that image to the box. So you're going to have to Option click in between again to undo the clip. so that you can move that one there, and then do, or whatever ones you're swapping. If it's this one, I would, oops, come in. Why are you not, oh, because I have auto select. Unclick that one, move that one there, move that one there, and then I have to reclip them. So I'm going to have to do some juggling with layers here to reclip everything. So you're going to swap images, and it's just practice with clipping and unclipping is all it is. And then the last thing is the background. They don't like the blue. They want it to be a golden yellowish orange color. You just have to change that color. So that's what you're going to do with that first image. The next one is to take this TIFF file, and this is a file that came straight from the book. And you're just going to practice the select and mask tool with that to select him out and mask him into a different background. So you need a layer mask. Do not just simply erase or select him and then move him into a different image with a different background. I need to see a layer mask or points will be deducted. I need to know you can use the masks. So you are going to place him in a different button. Create a layer mask from the selection and then swap backgrounds. Do the best you can with it. His hair is wispy, so it's a fun challenge. The last one is the guitar icon, and that's the one I want you to practice the pen tool with, is to select out the guitar. I gave you an easy background for this one. It's white, so it should be fairly easy to select out. But I want you can select out the guitar. Come on in, Dave. It's fine. I want you to take a screenshot once you create the path, so that I can see all your anchor points, so that you can't cheat on me and use a selection tool and create the mask and then I don't see it. So you are going to take a screenshot of the guitar with a path, label it guitar. I will bold this for you. Label that guitar PNG for your screenshot. Save the work path. So remember, double click the working path, give it a name. And then if you want to, you can save this to give you an extra option. What I want you to do is save that, create a selection, and then save that selection as a new channel. And I know I didn't really walk through that, but do I still have that? All right, let me use the pen tool really quick. So in the path, once you create that path name, I'll just label it path 1. When you create a selection, you have the option to save your selection so that you can use it in the future. And I know some of you have done this before. Under the select menu item, you have save selection. And you want to save that as a new channel. And how you're going to know, I'm just going to call it box, how you're going to know you did it right is in your channels palette, you have an extra channel down there that says box, or whatever you call it. Mine says box. Then you'll know you did it right. But that allows us ways to call up selections later on, and we'll be using those later. So for now, it's just creating it. And then you're just going to save each one of these as a PSD and submit all 3 of them next week. So it's an interesting challenge, but you get all the images, do what you need to do with it. Use FlexLab over the next week on Monday and Wednesday night if you need help with some of that, because you probably will, at least with the template, and then you're good to go. Phew.